This video is sponsored by Manscaped. The holidays are here, which means it's time to give the gift of smooth. Whether you're shopping for your partner, your brother, or even yourself, Manscaped's Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is the ultimate upgrade because nothing says happy holidays like a perfectly groomed package. Head over to manscaped.com and join over 13 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped. Use offer code SKILLUP for 15% off your entire order. Click below to start saving or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Gamers, this is one of the biggest news weeks we've had in a long time, so no time for a floaty intro, let's get straight to first base. Highlander always said there can be only one, but when it comes to the console wars, it appears there must always be three. Sega bowed out and Xbox rose to take its place, and now just as Xbox begins to diminish as a hardware platform, Gaben steps forward and hands down his latest creation, the GabeCube. I really love that people are calling it that, by the way, and I will absolutely be referring to it that way almost exclusively. Okay, but before we cover that, let's cover off some of the other hardware announcements first, because yes, there were others. The first is the reveal of a brand new Steam controller. Sadly, it's not as weird looking as its predecessor, but the good news is that it is more functional. It'll still retain the option for trackpads, since Valve say that they see great use on the Steam Deck, only now you get that additional stick on the right, something the previous Steam controller didn't have. This thing is basically like a Steam Deck without the screen, and since the Steam Deck is so comfortable to hold, this is great. Connectivity is king for this thing, which is why it comes with a dedicated USB dongle that also doubles as a charging port that clips on magnetically. Very easy to use. Also, Valve are promising upwards of 35 hours of battery life on a single charge, a substantial improvement over the 35 minutes I get out of my PS5 DualSense Edge controller. Anyway, that's the controller, nothing too exciting, but it's nice nonetheless. Kicking things up a notch was the next reveal, a dedicated standalone VR headset called the Steam Frame, the successor to Valve's Index. That one was a tethered device with no onboard compute, whereas this one is powered by a Snapdragon processor, the likes of which you'd find in a top-of-the-line smartphone from the last few years. So that means that you can play games on this thing without needing to plug it into a PC, but it also means that its performance is fairly capped. That is by design though, because Valve are thinking about this piece of kit very differently. The focus of this device seems to be on wirelessly streaming content from your PC to your headset, and that includes non-VR games, by the way, since the simulated screen experience means you can play any game in your Steam library if you like. The way that Valve are delivering this is through the use of a dedicated Wi-Fi channel that only streams sound and video from your PC to your headset. It does that with the aid of a USB dongle that plugs into your PC, creating a dedicated Wi-Fi 6 connection that can handle the amount of data required for a smooth image. That's actually why the headset has two Wi-Fi 7 channels, one dedicated to processing the dongle data, and another channel used for actual internet. It's kind of genius, to be honest, since I personally use Wi-Fi 6 to stream to my VR headset, and it works really well even now with, the Wi-Fi processing other data. So to know that it will be even better on this new device is exciting. Valve go even further with this stuff, implementing a feature called foveated streaming, where cameras trained on your eyes can see where you're looking, and the streamed image quality is deprioritized where you aren't looking to create more headroom for a better image wherever you are looking. Again, genius. Honestly, very interested to see how the arrival of this device will impact the VR landscape, which has felt like it's been in the doldrums for a while now, despite Meta pumping billions and billions of dollars into it. I don't anticipate we're likely to see an explosion of VR content as a result of the Steam Frame, but it will be another important step forward for a technology platform that still feels like it's in its absolute infancy. Okay, time for the big one now, the GabeCube. God, it's handsome, just look at it. It's like the short king version of the Xbox Series X. This is unashamedly a PC, but as you'd expect, it's not running Windows, it's running the Linux-based Steam OS, devoted entirely to playing video games. Sadly, it will not come pre-installed with Microsoft Copilot or Microsoft Excel, so if that's important to you, then I encourage you to pick up the new Asus ROG Xbox Ally. The specs for this thing are sort of around entry-level-ish, and that's important to understand since Valve clearly want to position this device as an entry point into the Steam ecosystem, rather than being an enthusiast device that will deliver you cutting-edge visuals and performance. It's running a semi-custom AMD RDNA 3 GPU, and combined with its Zen 4 processor, Valve says it's about 6 times more powerful than a Steam Deck, and can handle 4K 60 FPS with FSR upscaling enabled. So this thing will be able to run basically everything, but new AAA stuff is probably going to be set to, medium or even low settings, while your indie titles are going to be the ones that truly deliver on that 4K 60 promise. And that's all fine, but the big question you probably have about this device, and the others too, I guess, is the price. And the bad news is that Valve didn't reveal any pricing information. If the Steam machine is a really competitive $400 to $500, then happy days. It becomes a very easy device to recommend to people, but as that price creeps up and up, as it's likely to do, the product becomes more and more niche. Valve has said that all 3 devices will ship in early 2026, and that they'll ship in all territories where the Steam Deck is currently available. What's fascinating about all of this, of course, is that Steam has taken a big swing at the console audience, since the GabeCube is clearly intended to sit underneath your TV. That naturally draws comparisons to Xbox, since they've all but confirmed that their next piece of hardware hardware will be a PC/console hybrid that runs Windows. Is there space for that device to do well if Steam beats them to the punch with a Steam machine? Well, look, here's the thing. There are so many differences between what Xbox might be hoping to achieve with a premium next-gen console versus what Valve are hoping to achieve with an entry-level console. There are differences between SteamOS and Windows in terms of their functionality and limitations. There are differences between these two companies and their business models. It's a real apples to oranges comparison, despite the fact that both devices will be PCs intended to be plugged into televisions. Having said all of that, Valve owns PC gaming. They have what is effectively a monopoly, at least as it relates to core gaming. They have the single best storefront experience anywhere, full stop. They have a fantastic, well-priced handheld. They're about to have a fantastic standalone VR headset that supports streaming your games from your PC, and they're also about to have a console-like device that is the perfect entry point for someone looking to step into the world of PC gaming. Now, you look at that market dominance, that storefront experience, and that hardware lineup, and you tell me if Microsoft can compete with that. I'm going to tell you right now, they can't and they won't, but that's also not their plan. Microsoft is a third-party publisher now with some very modest hardware ambitions. Valve is stepping up to the plate as a legitimate force in the console gaming space at the exact moment that Xbox is stepping back. And 10 years from now, I would not be at all surprised if Valve's hardware lineup has grown and flourished, while Xbox have already announced that they're getting out of the hardware business entirely. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying I wouldn't be at all surprised. Valve's market presence gives them a tremendous head start in whatever space they enter, and while that hasn't always worked out for them in the past, this hardware lineup, backed by the excellent Steam OS, demonstrates how much Valve have learned from their previous mistakes. I think this stuff is going to do really well. Not necessarily sell, 50 million units or whatever, but I think it'll be a beachhead that Valve will continue to consolidate over the coming years. The age of the GameCube is about to begin. Moving on to some Sony news now, and hot off the presses are two surprise announcements, both of them not great for one big reason. I'll give you a clue. It starts with M and it ends with Obile. The first is the reveal of Horizon Steel Frontiers, the rumored Horizon MMO that's been in production for a while now. It's been developed by NCSoft in collaboration with Guerrilla Games. And you know what? The gameplay trailer looks pretty damn impressive. It's sporting some great looking environments. The combat looks fun, very Monster Hunter-esque, but I invite some competition into that space. We need it after Wild Hearts just kind of pieced out. And also, just being able to explore this world with a custom character alongside your buddies, that's pretty cool. As someone who's into the Horizon games, I should be pretty excited about this. My enthusiasm is somewhat subdued by the fact that it's, quote, built specifically for mobile, end quote. So yeah, it's a free-to-play mobile game, though it will have crossplay with PC, but you know what platform it's not available on? PS5! That is insane. That feels like a total slap in the face of the fans who've made this franchise successful. Hell, without them, this MMO would not exist at all. There currently seem to be no plans to bring this to a PS5. I really hope Sony and NCSoft reconsider, because that's some straight up bullshit. Coincidentally, this isn't the only upcoming free-to-play mobile game based on a Sony IP. Announced on the very same day was Ratchet & Clank Ranger Rumble. It's a mobile-only competitive team shooter set in the Ratchet & Clank universe, and it's, well, exactly what you'd expect, really. I'm less bummed about this one not coming to console because, yeah, it looks like a mobile game, and I don't think Ratchet & Clank fans are missing out on too much here, but still, I guess it would have been nice. The fact that neither of these games based on PlayStation exclusive IPs will be playable on a PlayStation just comes across as kind of disrespectful to Sony's audience. Like, these IPs wouldn't be what they are today without that loyal player base, and for Sony to then release these games on mobile and PC and not put the work in to port them to PS5, that just feels wrong, and I think eventually it's going to bite Sony in the ass. And not for nothing, but you're missing out on a huge potential player base by not bringing these titles to PS5, since the PS5 is selling like hotcakes right now, at least according to a recent earnings call where Sony made some very interesting comments about Marathon and Bungie. First up is that console sales data though. Combining the numbers of their business data and sales website page with the supplemental information from their Q2 financial report, Sony has sold approximately 84.1 million PlayStation 5 consoles as of the 30th of September this year. For comparison, the PlayStation 4 had shipped more than 117 million units as at the 30th of June 2022, and the PlayStation 2 has sold through more than 160 million units as of the 31st of March 2012, firmly holding its place as Sony's best-selling console, and in fact, the best-selling console of all time. Still, that's an impressive result for the PS5 considering that it's only been around for 5 years. Another interesting comparison is that the PS5 has now outsold every generation of Xbox since the Xbox 360 was Microsoft's highest-selling console, and that capped out at 84 million units. The Xbox One sold approximately 58 million units, and that's a guess because Microsoft stopped reporting unit sales during that generation. Xbox Series S and X consoles are estimated to have sold approximately 33 million units. So it's safe to say that at 84 million units, the PS5 is doing a little better. How has Sony secured such a commanding lead, you ask? through the antiquated practice of making games so good that people want to buy a console to play them. A completely alien concept to Microsoft's executives, but I assure you, it works. Speaking of exclusives, Ghost of Yotei has sold 3.3 million copies in a month, putting it somewhere in line with the sales of its predecessor, despite its higher price tag and the fact that the PS5 hasn't been as widely adopted as the PS4. So another big win for Sucker Punch and by extension Team Blue. The more interesting story though is what Sony's chief financial officer Lin Tao had to say about Bungie's in-development extraction shooter Marathon. Tao responded to a question regarding progress on the project, to which she replied, quote, "With regards to the development of Marathon, we are still working on it. From October 22nd to 28th for a week, there was a technical test that involved 80,000 people, and as a result, the gameplay and retention, those are the key KPIs that we tested on. We are in the process of analyzing the performance against those KPIs, and as needed, we will make corrections," end quote. You might recall that the game was slated to release on September 23rd of this year, but was delayed following the negative reception to its alpha playtest. No new date was set, but when asked about how comfortable she felt about releasing it before March 2026, which marks the end of the financial year for Sony, she said, quote, "We are fully dedicated to launching the title to schedule. We will assume that we will launch this within this financial year, and that is included in the forecast," end quote. I do wonder if the outsized success of Arc Raiders has given them confidence in their genre choice, or fear of now having to compete with an established entrant that set such a high bar. Probably a mix of both, I guess. Later in the call, Tao addressed concerns about the risks the company faced if Marathon did not meet commercial expectations, saying, quote, "If the performance is not going to reach what we expect, of course there is a risk of impairment loss, but we don't believe that will impact the whole game segment, at least at this point in time," end quote. That term impairment loss is basically accounting speak for writing down the value of an asset for one reason or another, and believe it or not, Sony applied a $204 million impairment loss to Bungie and Destiny. The loss, when coupled with $100 million in other non-Bungie impairment write-downs, meant that Sony's games and services business saw a 13% reduction in operating income, and had these write-downs not been applied, total operating income would have increased by 23%. So this is a huge blow to the business unit, and most of the blame can be laid at Bungie's feet. Here's what the CFO had to say when asked about such a substantial write-down, quote, "Regarding Destiny 2, particularly due to the changes in the competitive environment, the level of sales and the user engagement have not reached the expectations we had at the time of the acquisition of Bungie. While we continue to make improvements, we downwardly revised the business projection for the time being and recorded an impairment loss against a portion of the assets at Bungie," end quote. And yeah, I mean, it makes total sense that Sony seemed disappointed with Bungie here. Sony acquired the studio for an eye-watering $3.6 billion some 3 years ago, but ever since the release of the well-received Final Shape expansion back in June of last year, the game's popularity has quickly spiraled downwards, sinking to an average of around 13,000 concurrent players on Steam at the time of writing. Player engagement is at a historic low, and sales are surely reflecting that, and when combined with the rough sentiment towards Marathon, I don't imagine that Sony's bean counters are toasting the health of former Sony boss Jim Ryan at the moment. And I think what's really challenging, and what's probably driven this write-down, is the fact that there's no end in sight for Bungie's woes. The Star Wars themed expansion out in a little while has legendarily low levels of hype, and with a smaller team servicing the game and with a dwindling player base, it's hard to look for a horizon where things might suddenly get better. Marathon might be great in its own right, but unless it is incredible and goes absolutely gangbusters, it's not going to be enough to make that $3.6 billion look like money well spent. Tao's a little more confident in Sony's other live service products, however, emphasizing the recent performance of Helldivers 2 and MLB The Show 25 following their Xbox release. She had this to say, quote, "Although performance varies by title, our live service games overall accounted for more than 40% of our first-party software revenue, similar to the previous quarter, and are a recurring source of revenue. Helldivers 2, which also released for Xbox in August of this year, is doing extremely well, not only attracting new users on Xbox, but also seeing increased engagement from existing users on PS5 and PC. This resulted in a significant increase in sales of the title year on year. MLB The Show 25, released in March, also continued to perform well during this quarter," end quote. So yeah, it's good time for Sony's consoles, good time for Sony's live services, but really, really bad times for Bungie, and it looks like it's going to stay that way for some time yet. Speaking of sci-fi extraction shooters, Arc Raiders released last week and has gone absolutely huge in exactly the same way that Sony hopes Marathon will. According to reports from Embark Studios' parent company Nexon, Arc Raiders has sold over 4 million copies across all platforms. It's a success that's echoed in all the chatter across social media, but you need only look at its Steam numbers. At the time of writing, it's reached an all-time peak concurrent player count of 460,000 players, and it sits at a 90% very positive score with over 49,000 reviews counted. Just an absolutely absurd result for a game that was feeling nervous about going up against Battlefield 6, but is now maintaining a higher concurrent player count than EA's Juggernaut. A little bit of irony in that, given that many of the people who work at Embark are actually former DICE employees. Funny how those things work out. The game's release has not been free of controversy, however, on account of Arc Raiders' use of AI-assisted text-to-speech, something that their previous game, The Finals, also took advantage of. In speaking to PC Games N last month, design director Virgil Watkins had this to say on the matter, quote, "It's the same as The Finals. We use that text-to-speech model. That is, we hire and contract voice actors for it. It's part of their contract that we use it for this purpose, and that allows us to do things like our ping system, where it's capable of saying every single item name, every single location name, and compass directions. That's how we can get that without needing to have someone come in every time we create a new item for the game," end quote. Next on, CEO Jung-Hoon Lee has argued that AI is in fact a necessity. In an interview with Japanese game outlet GameSpark, he said, quote, "First of all, I think it's important to assume that every company is now using AI. But if everyone is working with the same or similar technologies, the real question becomes, how do you survive? I believe it's important to choose a strategy that increases your competitiveness," end quote. Someone who fully disagrees is Eurogamer. Their review has been doing the rounds lately on account of them scoring Arc Raiders 2 out of 5 stars on the basis that the use of AI voices at all feels blatantly contradictory to the game's setting, saying, quote, "You made a game about the tragedy of humans being replaced by robots while replacing humans with robots, Embark. It displays a total lack of awareness or worse, willful ignorance of Arc Raiders' own semantics," end quote. The review has generated a huge amount of chatter since everyone seems to have very strong feelings on whether or not Eurogamer was justified in giving the game that score when the rest of the review was a rather glowing assessment of the game. On the one hand, people argue that the ethics of AI technology shouldn't feature into a final score, or if they do, it should have less of an impact since the rest of the game was so good. Others argue that AI poses an existential threat to various parts of the creative process, particularly voice acting, and that penalizing game companies who utilize this sort of technology sends a strong signal that might make them reconsider it in future. There's also the argument that this is a review from a person, and a person can have whatever opinion they please. There's honestly no easy answers to this because I think all perspectives are valid on some level, but I'll tell you this is exactly the thought process I had to go through when I reviewed The Finals a few years ago. I had an entire block in that review devoted to the AI voice acting, which frankly speaking was terrible and made the game worse, and I said as much. And I also said that The Finals felt like a beachhead in a war that creatives are destined to lose, and as such there becomes something melancholic about celebrating its success too widely or too loudly. That didn't stop me from recommending the game though, because it was a fantastic game despite its shitty voice announcers, but it did take at least a little bit of the luster off an otherwise incredible game. I don't really have any clear answers here because, again, I do believe that all perspectives in this debate are valid on some level. All I will say is that it's definitely not going to be the last time we're debating this topic. A survey of 615 game developers earlier this year revealed that 87% were using AI in their development process. 87%! A lot of the time, we don't even know that it's being used since it's utilized for things like coding or quality assurance. But as these tools look to absorb more of the creative process and we feel their impact on things like music, art, and voice, we'll surely be forced to consider this technology more deeply. I mean, it was only this week that an AI country song topped the Billboard charts in the US, the very first time that a piece of AI music did that. And to be clear, I don't like that that happened. I think it sucks. I think it's weird and dystopic, but it is happening, and it's only a matter of time before something similar starts happening in the world of video games. So yeah, like I said, it certainly won't be the last time that we're debating topics like this. Turning back to good old-fashioned video games now, and it doesn't get much more old-fashioned than Halo, or more specifically, Halo Infinite. Or, should I say, Halo Finite, as Halo Studios has announced that the game will be receiving its final content update later this month. In a blog post, the studio had this to say, quote, "With multiple Halo titles in development, we need our whole team's combined focus to deliver new experiences with the same passion and care that our community has given us. While we remain committed to supporting Halo Infinite on the road ahead, Operation Infinite is the last major content update currently planned," end quote. I will say that the final content update really isn't sending things off with a bang. I mean, we're talking about a double XP boost, a new battle pass, and a bunch of cosmetics, which I think is quite indicative of how poorly this studio has managed this game since its release. Recall that Halo Infinite was intended to receive support for much longer than just 4 years, as suggested by studio head Chris Lee, who told IGN back in 2020, quote, "We want Infinite to grow over time versus going those numbered titles and having all that segmentation that we had before. It's really about creating Halo Infinite as the start of the next 10 years for Halo, and then building that as we go with our fans and our community," end quote. The curse of the 10-year plan. It strikes again. This news isn't totally surprising given that Halo Infinite's playbase has been dwindling for many years now on account of its slow rollout of new maps and modes, but it does put Halo fans in a very weird position. The only upcoming Halo game we know of right now is the recently revealed Unreal 5 remake of Halo Combat Evolved, which will not have an online PvP component. So Halo fans that enjoy that part of the experience, of which I would argue that's the vast majority, just won't have anything new to service that need for the foreseeable future. Halo Studios are working on something multiplayer related, but it's not coming anytime soon, so yeah, maybe get back into that cryopod for a few years, Chief. we'll wake you when we need you. Finally, a brief update on the union-busting accusations aimed at Rockstar Games following the sudden firing of over 30 employees last week. Independent outlet People Make Games recently released a video covering the situation. It is a really fantastic video, highly recommend giving it a watch if you aren't caught up. But a new piece of info that gives credence to the allegations was the suggestion that these firings might be related to UK statutory recognition union laws. People Make Games reports that over 10% of Rockstar employees had signed up for the union, which is one of the requirements for unions in the UK to gain statutory recognition, ensuring that Rockstar would be forced by the government to recognize them. But before that announcement of the union could be made, staff were laid off. And yeah, hard not to see the connection there. And if it's not a connection, that is one hell of a coincidence. It's sobering to hear directly from those impacted too. One of the rallying workers interviewed by People Make Games said, quote, "Gross misconduct on my CV or my resume for the rest of my life, that is a huge detriment to any future career prospects. All of us still want to be here. We want our jobs. We want to finish what we were working on. And now the internal shame of having this gross misconduct with you forever, it's hard to explain," end quote. As a reminder, Rockstar claims that gross misconduct involves, quote, "distributing and discussing confidential information in a public forum," end quote, which Alex Marshall, president of the Independent Workers Union of Great Britain, feels is quite a stretch. In People Make Games video, he said this, quote, "They weren't on these big open forums spouting secrets on the company. This was a finite union Discord in which people were discussing their material conditions at the company. They should be legally protected to do that," end quote. Marshall goes on to point out that while Rockstar have likely accounted for things like bad press and court settlement money, what they may not be prepared for is the outpouring of support both outside and indeed inside the company. The footage shows one of the union members reading out a note from an alleged employee still at Rockstar saying, quote, "The energy, the excitement, that spark that made this place so special is now shattered. It's heartbreaking because right now, when we should be more united and focused on the project than ever, most of us are scared, hurt, and feel uncertain," end quote. And here's the thing, right? I don't know what happened because Rockstar has not released any evidence to back up their claims. Furthermore, if this information was leaked, where the fuck is it? If a 240p resolution image of a random NPC's butt crack leaked, it would be all over every fucking website on the planet. That is the power of GTA SEO. If there was leaked information, it would be everywhere. But where is it? And let's say that some information was leaked. Did all 35 people who were fired leak it? Like, imagine if someone on your team at your job did something they shouldn't have done, and then 34 other people got fired as a result of that, when they were in no way complicit and no harm seems to have been done since there's no publicly leaked information. I would love for Rockstar to provide more information on this, and we have reached out to them for comment, but right now it's impossible to believe the story they are giving us. Impossible. And there are now 35 people out of the job who will not get credited in the game that they may have spent upwards of a decade working on. They won't get their bonus when the game ships, which would have been huge. They haven't been treated with respect and dignity. If this wasn't union busting, then those 35 people deserve to know why they lost their jobs, and frankly, we all deserve to know since Rockstar is an important company in this industry and the behavior they role model will have flow-on impacts. Just yesterday, the union confirmed that they have filed suit, so this will go to a legal battle. Hopefully the answers come sooner rather than later. No lightning round this week, but we do have some sort of free stuff. On the Epic Games Store, they're cranking up the dial and offering 3 freebies for the next week, and they're all kind of cool in their own little way. One is Song of Silence, which is an absolutely gorgeous looking strategy game that came out last year to quite a positive reception. They're updating the game with a big multiplayer update, so no surprise they're taking the chance to expand the player base with Epic. Definitely grab that one. Joining Song of Silence is Scourgebringer, a fast-paced roguelike platformer that came out back in 2020, back when we had slightly fewer roguelites. That one also got a pretty good reception, can't go past some tight pixel art. Last one to round out the Epic trio is 0 Hour, a slow-paced tactical FPS from a team based in India. A bunch of people have played this one, and it's got a mostly positive rating on Steam, though the more recent reviews have been a bit more mixed. Sounds like they're clearly ready to have more people take a look at it though, so check it out if you're looking for a Rainbow Six Siege alternative. Hey, are you enjoying the show? Well, there's a good chance that you're going to love our website, thisweekinvideogames.com, since every single story we covered in the first half of this show was covered days ago on the website. That is the beauty of daily news coverage. You can cover stuff as it happens, and with us, all of that news coverage is 100% ad-free, even if you signed up to just the free casual visitor membership tier. If you do want to chip in a few bucks and become a supporter, you'll get access to exclusive weekly newsletters, features, op-eds, and more, and an ad-free version of this very new show. So visit thisweekinvideogames.com to sign up either for free or as a paying supporter. And with that, back to the video. So what got announced or delayed this week? Well, we'd be remiss not to mention the fact that both Nintendo and Sony held showcases this week. But look, Nintendo just showed off a new trailer for the Mario Galaxy movie that revealed Brie Larson as Rosalina. And the biggest thing in PlayStation's State of Play was probably a controller charging hook for a monitor. Okay, to be fair, PlayStation did flag that this State of Play would primarily be focused on Japan and developers from Japan and Asia, with their big final announcement being that they're releasing a Japan-only, Japanese language only, digital only PS5 console for 55,000 yen. That comes out to just over $350. For comparison, the current digital only PS5 is $460 at GameStop. This is very similar to the thing that Nintendo did with its cheaper Japan only Switch 2 console, allowing these two juggernauts to compete on their home turf without fear that these lower margin consoles will end up being exported en masse to other markets with higher margins and/or tariffs. Aside from that, Sony also announced a 27-inch 1440p gaming monitor with all the bells and whistles you'd usually expect, 240Hz refresh, HDR, etc. But the big hook was literally a charging hook for the DualSense controller, which you flip out from the bottom of the monitor like a little appendage. I'm just gonna leave that one right there. It's only available in the US and Japan anyway. Aside from the hardware, honestly the most exciting stuff by far was the official announcement of the first expansion pack for Elden Ring Night Rain called The Forsaken Hollows. That's coming out on December 4th. Sony also announced a second closed beta for Marvel Tokon Souls for December 5th, throwing Ghost Rider and Spidey into the mix with a few new stages. Aside from that, a bunch of smaller games from Arc System Works like Blaze Blue, Entropy Effect X, and Damon and Baby. Bandai Namco and Sega threw up a bunch of trailers for upcoming DLC for their 2025 games. There are a couple of broken law horror games, which I'm definitely too scared to play, and Square Enix dropped a couple of new trailers for Dragon Quest VII and Octopath Traveler 0. Looking outside the state of play, that Pokemon Life Simulator Pokemon Pokopia got a release date announced for it 5th of March next year, and it's releasing on a game key card, which has not made people at all happy. Koei Tecmo is actually taking the lead for this one, but I'm not sure things would have been different otherwise, but anyway, worth mentioning. Hey, you guys like Resident Evil? Then surely you must be hyped for the free-to-play mobile game Resident Evil Survival Unit, right? Look, there's clearly a huge market for these kind of mobile battle RPGs. Capcom wouldn't have given up their IP to a third-party developer like they did unless they probably were going to make a lot of money from it. Sure, you could just straight up replay Resident Evil 4 on your phone, but sometimes you just want to make a silly dream team of characters and make them live with each other in a big mansion, which is absolutely a part of this game. This is coming out in November for iOS and Android, and you can register for it right now. One delay announcement this week, and it's a huge bummer. Mixtape is an absolutely phenomenal looking game from Australian developers Beethoven and Dinosaur, who have teamed up with Annapurna Interactive for the second time to make this coming of age story set to a killer licensed soundtrack. A few of us here on the team have played the first 30 minutes of it and absolutely loved it. There are some particularly awkward but incredible moments that I will not spoil. This was slated for 2025 originally, but they've now pushed it out to 2026. But in what is probably the most apt delay announcement we've ever seen, they created a mixtape of songs to say sorry. Very nice. So what came out last week? Well, we'll kick things off with Possessors, which is the third game from the beleaguered developer Heart Machine, responsible for the banger that was Hyperlight Drifter, the disappointing Hyperlight Breaker, and they've recently made a number of preemptive layoffs ahead of the release of Possessors. Sadly, Possessors doesn't seem to have knocked it out of the park. It's landed at a fair 73 on OpenCritic with a bit of range in those scores. PC Gamer landed at a 71 out of 100, saying, quote, "While I don't think Possessors is as revelatory as it perhaps needed to be in 2025's unsustainably competitive market, it's definitely the work of a studio with an idiosyncratic approach to graphics, movement, and storytelling," end quote. On our team, Austin was very much looking forward to this one as the title that would hopefully help Heart Machine bounce back, but admittedly, he hasn't been having a great time with it. He likes the character art and the vibes, but otherwise he describes it to us as a stock standard Metroidvania with stiff animations and dull environment art and some frustrating level design. He'll have more to say on it in his review, which you can expect on the channel sometime soon. Moving on to a more uplifting story, Goodnight Universe is the new game from the developers of the eyelid-controlled narrative game Before Your Eyes. This one sees you play as a 6-month-old baby with psychic powers, and it had already picked up awards before it got released this week. Seems like those awards weren't for nothing. It's currently sitting at a strong 82 on OpenCritic, with several critics saying how emotionally powerful it was despite its comedic presence. GameSpot slapped a 9 out of 10 on it and concluded, quote, "Goodnight Universe employs similar tricks to the team's previous award winner, but it takes bigger risks along the way, all before an emotionally messy, loving gut punch of a finale. Life is far from perfect, everyone would agree, yet it's in exploring that obvious fact that this team has achieved something so memorable once again. Nice Dream Games' Goodnight Universe is both mechanically simple and emotionally complex. Presented as a story about a baby, it's more accurate to say it's about the time we spend on Earth, with whom we spend it, and what we leave behind when our time is up," end quote. Staying with the highs now, Luminous Arise has arrived to make everyone rethink their Game of the Year list on account of it being so peak. Seriously though, given how well Tetris Effect landed with everyone, it probably isn't a surprise that their second go around with another beloved puzzle action game would land as well as it has. It's sitting at a mighty 86 on OpenCritic with acclaim all round. Eurogamer gave it 4 out of 5 stars, saying, quote, "The central mode is so staggeringly joyous and compelling that it draws my eye and my attention and leaves me powerless to do anything else," end quote. The team here has all been enjoying this one. I'm absolutely terrible at it, mind you, but thoroughly enjoying its whole deal, the incredible symphony of sounds, the ridiculous visual concepts they've come up with, and yes, it is really overwhelming in VR in the best possible way. I've got a review for that one on the channel right now, so I'll drop a link to it below the like button. By the way, if you haven't hit the like button yet, now would be a great time to do that. We've got to shout out Ubisoft's Anno 117 Pax Romana, since it seems to have made the strategy nerds very happy. It's sitting at a mighty 84 on OpenCritic, joining the ranks of Europa Universalis from the week before. IGN gave this one a 9 out of 10, saying, quote, Anno 117 Pax Romana is a gorgeous antique city builder that sucked me in for dozens of hours as I planned out my next district or simply watched the bustle along my aqueduct adjacent boulevards. The fantastic deep trade system with a side of exciting naval combat really seals the deal. I could take or leave the campaign, but I still don't think I've run out of things to do in the highly customizable endless mode. It may not be quite fit for a triumph, but it's certainly worthy of a standing ovation, end quote. A brief look at the Disco Elysium inspired Rue Valley now, and there aren't a whole heap of reviews at the time of writing, but enough to give it a strong 76 on OpenCritic. The Gamer gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, concluding, quote, Rue Valley is a clever puzzle game that uses its time loop foundations not only to present a unique challenge for players, but also to craft a rich narrative that will tug on the heartstrings, end quote. Stu is playing through this one for us right now, actually, so do look forward to his review going up on This Week in Videogames.com sometime next week. All right, so what's coming out this week? Well, folks, it's the big one, the game all of your non-gamer friends are probably asking you to play this weekend, and the only game they'll talk to you about all year, except for FIFA maybe, Call of Duty Black Ops 7. That's right, it's back-to-back Black Ops for your pals at Activision this year, now that they realize that that's the one that everyone really likes. It's got it all, a single-player mode, a co-op campaign, competitive multiplayer, zombies, anti-cheat that will probably still not work, bros being dudes, dudes being bros. Honestly, I'm usually sort of curious about annual COD installments. Between Battlefield 6 and Arc Raiders, I'm good, and unless I hear that this entry is particularly S tier, I'm probably going to skip this one entirely. If you're curious about it though, you can grab it on November 14th for PS5, PC, and Xbox Series consoles. Plus, it's also available on Game Pass Ultimate. Also out on Friday, and also in the kind of free stuff bucket, is Where Winds Meet, a free-to-play open-world RPG themed around historical Chinese wuxia martial arts. It comes from NetEase and Everstone Studios, and it's been out in China for a while. Apparently, it's not a gacha game, which is quite a surprise. Instead, it's leaning into what will probably be very pricey cosmetics, and it's coming out on PC and mobile, as well as PS5 for a 6-month exclusivity period, at least according to the PlayStation trailer for it. So I guess that begs the question, where do the winds meet anyway? Hopefully not in Tarkov, because if you talk to anyone who's played Escape from Tarkov, you will know that that is not a very friendly place. This foundational extraction shooter that entered early access period all the way back in 2016, it's now entering 1.0 on Saturday, November 15th. And yes, I just double checked that. They really did spend that long in early access. It's also coming out on Steam at the same time, so it'll be really interesting to see how this one shakes up the Arc Raiders and Battlefield dynamic over the weekend. Jumping over to Monday, November 17th, we've got a kung fu game of a different flavor. Force Strike from Japanese indie studio Skeleton Crew, published by Devolver Digital, is a kind of 2D action combat roguelike where you have the chance to practice each encounter you get into before taking your one chance to do it for real. Stu's already got a review for this one up on This Week in Videogames.com, so I'll drop a link to that below the like button. Long story short, he says it's a roguelike that relies way more on skill than RNG, very well crafted, difficult but rewarding, and very unique indeed. Here's one a few folks have been waiting for. Moonlighter 2, The Endless Vault, is the sequel to the shop management and dungeon crawling game from Spanish indie studio Digital Sun, now in 3D, with polygons and everything. Looks lovely. It's launching into early access on PC to start with, and it releases on Wednesday, November 19th. Another early access game releasing the next day on Thursday is Prologue Go Way Back. This is the new one from Brendan Green, aka Player Unknown, aka the guy who made PUBG. If you haven't heard about this one, it's a hardcore single-player open-world survival game set in a massive procedurally generated map where your lone goal is to reach a weather tower off in the distance. Interesting concept, and they say it's just the first part of a much bigger project from them, so hopefully this experiment proves worthwhile. Joining it on Thursday is Demon School, the JRPG from Necrosoft, inspired by early Persona games, with a focus on a momentum-based, turn-based combat system. You might remember this title making headlines back in September when a little game called Hollow Knight Silk Song got dropped, and a bunch of indie games scrambled out of the way to try to find a better time to set up shop and start selling their wares. This one does look very cool though. It's coming out on all platforms. And finally, to close out the week, we've got the big pink ping pong ball himself, Kirby's Air Riders, aka Sakurai's personal pet project he forced Nintendo to let him make and hold 2 incredibly long Nintendo Directs about before he would even think about making another Smash Bros. Game. It's coming out on Nintendo Switch 2. It's a racing combat game with several twists, a follow-up to the GameCube cult classic, and judging by the reception from the playtest this past weekend, it might continue to be a cult classic. I'd love to be proved wrong though. It's got that hamster after all. We don't want to see that little guy fail. Okay, so a little setup for this one. Over on This Week in Videogames.com, we've got a monthly columnist based in Japan, Daniel Robson, who talks about what the industry is doing and thinking about over there. He wrote this really interesting feature recently about how all these Japanese companies are starting to get into game publishing. And one of the examples he gave was Parco, a chain of department stores like Target or Kmart. We took a look at their portfolio of video games out of interest, and one of the games on their slate actually looked pretty cool, so put this on your radar.
Once, it must have been the year 1989, a guy named Collier lived here, but he wasn't doing well.
This one is called The Berlin Apartment, and it's a really sharp-looking, narrative-heavy mystery game set inside, you guessed it, an apartment, telling the story of 5 different inhabitants that have lived in the same place across a century, which seems to involve stuff like war, hardship, and space, I guess, for some reason. So we seem to be in an era where we're getting a bunch of games that were clearly conceived during and after COVID. Keeper was one of them apparently, and this is definitely one. It's a very cool concept. Like, of course, you sometimes wonder about all the people who loved your home as their own at one point. So here's hoping this one does some interesting things with the story. At the very least, it's lovely to look at. The Berlin Apartment releases on the 17th of November. And there's also a free demo available right now on Steam. If you like the look of it, you can find a link to it over on our Steam curator page, which also has links to all of the other Put This On Your Radar stuff we've recently covered. I'll leave a link to all of that below the like button. Our feel-good story for the week is one that had me setting my Uber Eats location to Tokyo, Japan. Recently, McDonald's Japan teamed up with Capcom for the release of a limited menu of Street Fighter-inspired burgers. Burgers themselves, nothing special, but the commercial they put together, you might say, I'm loving it.
McDonald に会いに行くストリートバーガーはい焦がしニンニク照り焼き焦がしニンニクマヨ卵照り焼きウィンストリートバーガーズ今だけ
All right, ladies and gents, what a show. Absolutely huge week of news between Steam's hardware announcements, the Bungie write-down, Sony announcing some mobile games, Halo Infinite being finite after all. Just massive. So a big thanks to the team for pulling all this together, both for the show, but also covering it as it happened on our website this week in videogames.com. For real, basically everything that went down this week, we had coverage on the website within the first hour of it happening. So if you do want up-to-the-minute coverage, then be sure to sign up over there. But if you prefer your news in the weekly format, then don't worry, this show ain't stopping anytime soon. Well, this specific one is, but the series continues. If you enjoyed yourself, then we'd love it if you could smash that like button. Super helpful in this business. Be sure to subscribe and ding the notification bell so you'll never miss a video. I'm working on a few reviews right now, so you'll hear plenty from me next week. Austin's working on a review for Possessors, so stay tuned for that. For now though, we're done. Have a great week. Oh, and by the way, are you taking care down there? For the rest of the world, Christmas time means sub-zero temperatures, but down here in Australia, it's hot as hell. So we're doing our best to get our beach bods ready. Believe me, it's a pretty hopeless task for most of us, but we do our best. Enter Manscaped and their legendary Performance Package 5.0, the best kit money can buy when it comes to taking care both up here and down there. In the kit is the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra, the most advanced ball trimmer in the history of the human species. Your body hair will tremble in fear at the sight of it, for it knows it cannot withstand the 2 interchangeable blades, one of them for skimming off the top and the new foil blade for a closer shave. The hair can try to run and hide, but it will not succeed, for the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra features dual LED spotlights to provide contrast on multiple skin tones. With that sort of illumination, there is nowhere for your wayward hairs to hide. That's not all, since the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra also features 3 length setting combs, plus it's waterproof, making it safe to use in the shower and very easy to clean. The Performance Package 5.0 also includes the nose and hair trimming Weed Whacker 2.0, the Crop Soother aftershave lotion, as well as the Crop Preserver anti-chafe ball deodorant. Once they touch your sack, you'll never go back. Hell, Manscaped are feeling generous this holiday season, so right now, if you grab the Performance Pack 5.0 Ultra, you'll also get some Manscaped boxers, very comfy, as well as the Shed 2.0 travel bag. Obviously, this is a great gift for your bro, your mate, or even your dad, if you have that kind of relationship. I don't know. Most men would do well to take better care down there, and so if you want to hook a brother up, or maybe even spoil yourself, then visit manscaped.com/skillup and use offer code SKILLUP for 15% off your order. That's manscaped.com/skillup, offer code SKILLUP for 15% off. Thanks, Manscaped, for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.